And I'm gonna be high.
Good on you, Donald. I'm the Rocket Man. Yeah.
I'm a rocket man. And I'm gonna be
Rocket Man. I'm a rocket man. I wanna go to the moon.
All right,
You're doing
Jonathan Salama from Transfix. How is your day going?
good. Still living the dream.
Still living the dream. Where are you out of?
I'm in Hoboken. I'm in New Jersey.
Okay.
We're fully remote now, so it's just everybody working from home, and it's awesome.
Yeah, there you go. Jonathan and I, just for the audience, we've done some business together, so I've had conversations with him in this exact room. But you're always on the go, always trying to sneak in a meal when you can. You're grinding still. But how long have you been running the business over at Transfix? When did you start it?
We started August 2013, so
Okay.
we're at 11, going on 12.
11, 12 years in the freight brokerage. What would you describe Transfix as you started it? And maybe you have a different definition today.
Yeah, I mean, as we started, we were a broker. Over the years, the industry started calling us digital broker and all this good stuff. But we were a broker.
Mhm.
It was just very, very tech enabled. Now we're a tech company enabling brokers. It's just
Look at
the
that.
the opposite way. Yeah, it's great.
And would you say, and this we'll get into this throughout the episode, I'm sure, but would you say that that recent change to be a tech company supporting brokers was just a natural evolution of your guys' skill
Yeah.
set in tech?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. So like it's not like we were like it all happened really quickly
Mm-hmm.
and really what's the right word in I can't find the word, but it all happened very organically.
Okay.
And so when we started talking to NFI, obviously it's public that NFI bought our brokerage. When we started talking to NFI, we had to we took a long look in the mirror and started to understand like what's our best value to the market out there
Yeah.
to customers. And it was at the time where obviously like I mean we're still in a down cycle, but it was even worse. And we thought like we what do we offer? Like we're a really good broker. Like at least I've always believed, and that's why NFI believed too. Like we had a really, really good brokerage, but the tech inward was highly differentiated. The tech outward started to get everybody started to catch up. Everybody had tracking. That was we started on the bedrock of we'll track every load, right? Because we were
Yeah.
going to have an app that nobody had back then. It was nobody was tracking loads, and so we had some differentiation for the outside market, the shippers, but over time these caught up, and we've always thought that our best assets was our internal tech, and philosophically we've always knew no broker is buying tech from a broker.
Yeah.
It's not like you're not like why would you give all your data, all your assets, all of this, all of your secret sauce to another broker?
Yeah.
Just not
And
happening.
even if you could somehow trust that they wouldn't use it, it just doesn't seem right.
It doesn't seem right. We would never do it, right? So for us, it was great timing, great timing, great opportunity. I have nothing but amazing thing to say about NFI. Normally, I think like you get battle scars from these kind of like big moves, but like
Yeah.
Dave Roaring and I just get along really well. And and the team is just great. It was a great experience. And so when you have the right partner with the right strategy, it was
Mhm.
time to make the move.
Do you think that, bigger picture, I started rocket shipping in 2020, so I've seen the growth cycle, and then I've seen obviously what we're in now, which is a freight recession that most people will say has been the longest in maybe ever, but
I mean,
definitely in
recorded.
our lifetimes, right?
Yeah.
And it's lower for longer than anybody thought. And now you don't see much speculation of it recovering, except for just recently. There's starting to be a little bit of maybe it's recovering.
We've talked about it'll recover in June 2025, back in June 2023.
All right. That is a great
Oh,
prediction. You got to make sure you
um,
get a clip of that. We'll just in 1 year or 7 months, we'll just
yeah, like
plop
we're
that on.
getting like our data doesn't show that like the data has been pretty consistent showing us June 2025.
Yeah.
Uh, I
Well,
mean,
here's hoping. I actually, for context, I wanted it to stay lower for longer because Rocket is growing into it, and it's an advantage for us as a profitable, sustainably growing company. I was hoping more people would exit, not because I wish badly on companies, but I was hoping that some of the bottom feeders might exit. And
yeah,
actually, to a large extent, that hasn't happened. People have hung on a lot longer than anybody anticipated. That could be
of
because of
course.
the PPP or the
Yeah.
economic disaster loans.
Or
But
you had a very big boom of business, and
yeah,
you were sitting on more cash
people
than
kept
you
their cash, yeah, and even if
had.
they invested in assets, they were able to flip those assets into loans, so
Yeah.
they're still surviving.
The counter argument about like why not sell the brokerage to NFI has always been, when the market recover, there'll be a lot less player, and
Mhm.
therefore everybody who's on the other side is going to do well for a while.
Yeah, that has been
So, yeah,
floated.
so I completely understand your thesis there. That makes total sense.
I think, though, that, none of us have a crystal ball. I do think that early movers are often rewarded, so you guys were an early mover. Who knows what'll happen, but if it ends up being true that when we get to the other side of this, a lot of the people are still around and it's just as competitive as ever and it's just a capacity issue and who can cover the loads, you guys will probably look pretty smart. And if not, I think that you're in a position, especially if you're getting along well with Dave and NFI, that you guys, it doesn't matter. It's regardless. That's how I run my business. I don't run it by the macro. I run it by, hey, what's the best decision now? Because we can't make a decision for what's going to happen in 2 years.
No,
But to pull that thread, it sounds like, I want to get into venture capital. I want to get into freight tech, and you said it, digital broker, right? Transfix has been thought of as that, and you almost said it tongue in cheek a little bit as you said it.
it
So I
was
want to dig
like
into that.
we yeah, like it was the infamous
Yeah,
infamous digital broker.
yeah. And
Right.
so when I look at people on LinkedIn specifically, a lot of people see us on LinkedIn, but we have it on all the platforms. But when I see people talking about the industry on LinkedIn, they talk about Convoy, digital brokerage, venture capital, freight tech. Can you give me your best definition or what your view is of venture capital inside of freight tech and how you've used it as a vehicle for your company?
As high level as it gets. They're investors who are investing in the future of companies, not the present of the company, right? They're not investors who are going to be focused on, are you profitable? There's obviously different level of growth, and if you've been in business for 20 years and you're not profitable, then okay, maybe venture capital is not for you anyway. But if you're just starting and you need cash to start the business, and it's an interesting, like, it has traditionally, there's a tech aspect to the company. I've seen it so it doesn't have to, but traditionally it does. In and You get groups of investors giving you cash against equity, and now you have cash on your balance sheet to grow your business.
And so would you say, just definitionally speaking, most of them are funds, right? It's not like one
Yes.
person.
Yeah, they're not. It's not. So it depends. You'll see two types. You'll see the family office. It's their money. They're like from their family or their like extended family. They form like a group, and it's their money. Or you have like the more traditional VC is they have their own investors, and they're investing that money.
Okay. And then at Transfix, when you started, did you start with VC right away or did you start it and then raise?
So freight was not sexy back then. But, but I had a lot of people that either personal that on a personal level or on a professional basis. When I said like, "Oh, I'm starting a company in trucking," half the time like, "What? why?
And this is 2013. If someone just
Yeah,
seen this
this
clip,
is
2013 is not exactly the VC freight capital of the world when everything started.
no. So freight wasn't sexy and AI wasn't sexy. And so we're gonna do some like AI stuff around like freight. Like, what? So we've always thought we need a first customer to prove the thesis. We need to run some shipments. We need to have an app. So Drew and I ran the business for a year before we actually had uh, another partner who unfortunately passed. But it was the three of us early and worked it through. Like it, the first customer I always remember because the first customer was Barnes and Noble before the platform was ready, and they gave us a shot, basically just saying like, yeah, you'll figure it out. You can run that. Like so, we ran everything in Excel for the first like 3 months.
Oh, I love that.
So
Everybody needs that story right there. So it
that
was
was
a big opportunity,
uh,
and you guys could have said, no, we're not ready. And they said, figure it out. And that's basically how you ran it then, off of a customer need.
I think you'll agree with this, but essentially, like you just in the early days, you just don't say no to a customer.
No.
Like full stop.
It's
Like,
a luxury to be able to say no. That you don't have that luxury when you're starting.
you grow into it.
Yeah.
You grow into it, and it is a luxury. But at the beginning, Barnes and Noble just said, "Figure it out." We said, "Yep,
It's
no
awesome.
problem. You got this."
Yeah.
So we closed our first customer. We grew a little bit, and then we went to smaller. There are every fund, every VC typically like has like targets.
Hmm.
Some VC fund will only do your growth stage, which is like you've already got a product market fit, you've already growing, you already have a team, you already have a product, and now you need just gas to like on top of the fire.
Yeah.
Others are going to be just much earlier state. You have one customer, or you have no customers, but you have a good product. Like they'll. So we went towards that demography of venture capitalists. We some of them are still friends today. They're still on our cap table. They're great. We got very lucky. Yeah, so we got a small round. We raised significantly less than others in our space. Like we still raised a decent amount, but we've never been um, let's over raise, let's over invest, let's triple the engineering team. We've always tried to be very conscious, and the thesis was always let's build a business, right? Let's not build
Yeah.
a dream that is funded purely on like just money and then has no output. So we yeah.
Yeah. I think to kind of pull that thread, I think VC does get a bad rap in freight tech today, right? Because of what we've seen over the last couple of years with some companies that didn't work out and, never really panned out, but that could have been a multitude of factors. But I think what you said was you were building it to build a business that would create profit at some point, and there was the goal to make it profitable, and you had your rule of 40 and all of those things figured out. You weren't just, it wasn't a pipe dream. It wasn't, let's revolutionize the industry, and if it gets built over the next 4 years, then we'll figure out if a customer will use it, which I do think there is a lot of that only because of 2021, the ZERP
Yeah,
era.
I,
Money was just flying
I
out of people's hands.
totally agree. I totally agree. I think like just that's why some VC get a bad. We got really lucky, and I like all of our investors. They've had our back. They've been really good. But it's true that like there are good VCs and there are not so good VCs out there. And unfortunately, you hear a lot more about the bad ones than you hear about the good ones, and that gives the whole industry a bad rep. And yeah, if you give a lot of money to somebody that doesn't have a product, like yeah, your risks are a bit higher than than if you give the money to somebody who has a product and customers.
Yeah, but if you think about it, I try to be objective. Rocket, I bootstrapped it and I haven't raised, but I am looking into, angel investors, and we are building some tech. And so I'm looking at that side of the industry. But to be objective, VC funds also have a risk tolerance, right? They
100%.
want to
They're
be able
scared.
to hit the home run, and if you just look at it as incentives, they only need one home run out of 100. So that's why
That's
they're doing it that
absolutely
way.
right. They're placing bets,
Yeah.
and it's which one pans out, right? And they are. I haven't met a firm who, like, they understand the bet they make. They
Mhm.
fully get it. They understand the risk. They understand like they do. Every single one of our investor has analytics teams that like study all deals. Like it's a very very sophisticated space.
Yeah, and I think that part of the reason that I think 2021 and 2022 was a trap for a lot of companies because they were able to raise, but maybe shouldn't have raised as much as they did. And I think that I don't know the story of Convoy. Someday I'm going to be able to get Dan on here and hopefully he'll tell me about it. But I look at companies that, when Convoy went bankrupt and now I think Uber has flipped them, right? Is that who it, no, is it Uber or is it Flexport?
Like,
Flexport flipped them and they're back on. Maybe
yeah,
I can get Bill Drieger to come on as well. But
yeah,
the idea would be they raised all this money at a certain valuation. And then, from how I understand it, if they want to raise again, they don't want to have to raise at a lower valuation, even though that. So they kind of get pinched because the investors who are on the cap table are in at a certain amount and they will get washed if they lower the valuation. And so they got trapped in 2023. And it
yeah.
wasn't about the business model necessarily as it was more about, well, you need more cash, but you can't wash everybody off the table.
It's a very difficult. I mean, so I didn't have to live that. I'm very thankful, like, because we didn't have that problems of like we need to think about this problem, but um, it's really it's a really hard conversation and talking about like difficult decision. I remember our Series B, we had the opportunity to get so we raised I forgot it was so long ago I forgot the exact amount, but just round numbers, I think we raised around 20. And I remember we had the opportunity to raise 40. And we said it was torture conversation. The 40 came at a high, like the valuation was higher because at the end of the day they would take the same percentage out of the company, so like you need a higher valuation at 40 than you
Yeah.
needed at 20. So we did the risk, we did the math, we like looked at it. It's like as much as we'd like the 40, the valuation of 20 made so much more sense for the business that we're in. So we made the tough decision to go with 20 and not 40. And to this day I think it's was a really good
Honestly, I
decision.
bet that was gut wrenching. And so you said that it's you and Drew, and you had another co-founder.
No, back then it was just me and Drew.
But so you
um,
and Drew had to agonize over that because 40 million is a lot of money, and 20 million is also. But cutting it in half
There was a
when you
huge
can,
difference. There was a
I think
huge
people don't
difference.
understand it to the level that you do, and so I'll try to explain it. When you said valuation, you weren't giving up. Let's just say it was 10% of equity, right? You weren't going to give up 20% to get to 40. It was still just 10% round numbers.
That's right.
And it
They-
was all
just to-
about if you could make that valuation to raise Series C.
That's right. To just make the math easy. This was not the valuation we went after, but I'm just gonna make the math easy.
Yeah.
We would have, if we would have raised like 20 on 100.
Hmm.
This was like 40 on 200.
Yeah.
Right?
So then you
Like,
wouldn't have given up more of the company. You just would have had a lot more risk that you have to make that valuation the next time. So,
yeah, and that was just did
so
not.
that would have been, I think that's, I love having the fact that you're on the show because I think that's a real life story of not knowing if you're making the right decision because you can't know, and that's what entrepreneurship, and it's hard, and not everybody wants to be a business owner, and even the ones that do don't want to make decisions like that, because at the end of the day, and I want you to talk a little bit about this, in my experience, most of the biggest decisions get pushed up to me. I'm the CEO and the founder,
Yeah,
but
that's the deal.
what the benefit of being a number two or a number three at a company or an employee, and I've been in those positions too, is that on the tough decisions, I would analyze it and bring it up to somebody else, right? Now at Rocket, when I'm running it, those get brought to me, and I didn't realize this until the last 4 years of running a company. There's no guidebook, there's no manual, and you every single time you have no idea when you're going to know if you were right or wrong. It's like a game. You make the decision and you can never feel good or bad about it until you know.
I think there's this notion of like very often you'll hear like I not disparaging anyone. Everybody can do what they want and say what they want, but often you're like, oh, the answer is in the data. Like
Yeah.
the answer, like you just didn't have enough data to make like no.
Yeah.
Sometimes getting the data takes too long, and you don't have that time. You've got to make
Mhm.
the decision now.
Yeah.
And other time is just no. Like there's pros and cons on both sides, and it's like 50-50, and you gotta make a judgment call and buck stuff with you. If you make the wrong one, it's fully on you. And
Yeah.
it's if you make the right one, there's not a lot of like ooh good job. Like it's just
I
like
know. It's just like, oh, the company kept going. No one realizes that I had to make that one right decision.
yeah, and it's great. I mean it's part of the founder life, and then I mean I enjoy that a lot, but it all depends.
You know, it's
And
kind of
teach
fun
you.
too. And I like to give the perspective. So most of the time, well, I guess if I could just summarize it, just because you have a controversial opinion does not mean it's the wrong one. And just because most people think it's the wrong one doesn't mean it is. And so if you add that element into you're running a company, you might have 5 employees at the start, and then maybe you have 30, then you have 100. And I don't know how many you guys have now. How many employees is Transfix NFI?
We're about 50, give or take.
Yeah. So now there's a bunch of other opinions in the room. And then it's like the pressure of, and maybe I'll ask you, have you ever had to go through a decision where most of the company thought you were wrong and you had to make it anyways? You don't have to walk
Often.
through that exact decision, but do you have any good stories of everybody thinking Jonathan's making the wrong call here, but you have to convince them to believe in you too?
I think yeah, it's a lot about trust. It's a lot about like your work. Like at the end, like so, at the end, the short answer is yes, that happens often. But I also make decisions really fast. I prefer to move real fast, and if it's a wrong decision, I like the concept. Amazon talks about it a lot. The two-way doors versus one-way door, and if it's two-way door, you can, like essentially the two-way door is a decision you can come back from.
Mm-hmm.
A one-way door is like once you move that directions, you're stuck. You're not coming back.
Yeah.
As long as the decision is a two-way door, just go. Just go. Just
I
I
like
will
that.
make the decision extremely fast. One-way door, okay, let's think about it, pause. But sometimes because I make those decisions very fast, it's more they might disagree with like let's pause, let's think more. Um I think at the end we might all agree, but there's less cases where I really like the whole room said no and I said yes.
Yeah.
Um, I don't have a lot of example of that, but example Drew is a good like yin to my yang too.
Yeah.
Uh, so like we work really well together on these example. But for me, it's more about timing. And people, I hope people at Transfix know, like I I tend to work really really hard. I enjoy what I do. I work a lot. I work
Yeah.
hard, but I also like if you're going to be working late on a project, I want to be there with you. Like I just and I think that earns. I hope that earns a little bit of trust that I'm trying to do the best I can. I'm gonna make bad decision. Like
Yeah.
nobody. Like, I haven't made like maybe I don't know. Maybe Steve Jobs did. I don't know. I don't
No,
think
I
he'll
think
tell you.
he got ousted at one point and then had to come
Yeah.
back. So apparently he screwed up
So,
too.
so like, everybody does right. Like you make bad decision. I think the issue would be to take too long to make a bad decision. So that's why I move fast. But I
Or
think everybody
maybe,
knows on the team. I try my best.
yeah, maybe too though. It's I think that people get themselves in trouble not making bad decisions, but not being willing to admit they made a wrong decision and fix it. So you talk about two-way door. I hadn't heard that analogy, so I'm going to use that now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of two-way door situations that I make decisions on, and a lot of us do. But not everybody comes back through the door or chooses the other door because of ego or pride, or they didn't want to admit they were wrong, or because if they admit they were wrong, then they have to fire somebody. And that's way harder than just not admitting they were wrong and putting a band aid on it. So, I mean, that's part of it too.
Yeah,
Um,
everything's. I mean, nothing's easy,
yeah.
right? If this was easy, if rocket shipping was easy, there wouldn't be a rocket shipping. If like,
Or
right,
there's
like
100 of them and it wouldn't matter and it'd be a dime a dozen. Yep.
yeah, like so everything's hard. Like all decisions are hard, and like yeah, like I think I am hard to deal with. Like my teams are like everybody in Transfix. They're saint because I am not easy to deal with. But I am also happy to say like I was wrong. Let's pull back. Let's
Yeah.
go. Let's go the other way. Let's go to that other door or backward and forward. Like I I just care about speed. I just care about realizing very quickly that this was a mistake and we need to go back quickly.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that another thing that gives perspective, and this is something this isn't my idea. I don't really have any ideas. I just hear other people say them, and I'm able to regurgitate them. But
sounds great.
one of the things that I heard you say was talking about being able to, how should I say that? Being able to make a decision that's not popular within your company, right? And have the validity of, okay, I made that decision, but having to get everybody else to buy into it is sometimes pretty difficult. And I think that it goes to your credibility that you're able to do that. But the point I want to drill in on is if you make decisions quickly, sometimes people think you're wrong just because you made it quickly. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not because of the actual basis of the opinion, if it's right or wrong. But I think as humans, we ascribe certain value to a big decision has to be a longer thought process than a small decision. But I don't know if it was Steve Jobs or somebody. I heard it on a podcast. Maybe it was Alex Hormozzi, but he talked about the brain doesn't know that it's a different size decision from what you're going to eat today to
okay.
if you should fire that person. Your brain is a machine. It just makes a decision. And countless times in my life, and I'm 30, so not that many times, I guess, but you know, in my personal life, we're adopting right now. It's not finalized, but a
Yeah,
lot of the decisions that are being made, people are ascribing, oh, we have to wait longer to make this decision. We have to wait longer. And it happens in Rocket and it probably happens at Transfix. And you said you make quick decisions. I don't think humans realize that a decision is just a decision. And we're ascribing all of this. You got to wait 10 days for that one. If it's not a one-way door, just make the decision. You already know.
yeah. I mean, even so, I mean, in my personal life, like I make like those decisions. Real. I proposed to my wife 3 months in. I just know. Like
That's amazing, dude. So
I don't need to wait. I just know. We've been like we're on 13 years with 2 kids. Like I just know. Like, we
dude,
just
I didn't realize how similar we were. I got engaged and married within a year of dating my wife, and we've been married for 10 going on 11 years now, and we've got 2 going on 3 kids. And so
yeah, there you go. There you go.
why not be decisive? But I do think one, that's just how me and you are wired. Apparently we make quick decisions because we know. And there's
Yeah.
even in like mainstream, people are like, oh, some people are very decisive and some are not. But I think it can be boiled down to the bigger the decision, the more you think you should wait. But unfortunately, and I could kind of tie this earlier in the episode, I talked about not knowing until 6 months if you were correct, or until 1 year. A decision like an engagement, you might never know if you're just going to assume it was the right decision. And then 10 years later, it might not have been. Of course it was. But hiring somebody and realizing it was the wrong decision and then being able to correct it and fire them. I know that people say hire fast, fire fast, but I think that goes to the credibility of making fast decisions. If you don't undo bad ones, if there isn't a two-way door, you can't be an effective founder, because the next time you're in the room and everybody disagrees, you won't have the credibility to say, I'm going to do this anyways. And you'll become the founder that everybody disdains.
Yeah, that's I have nothing to add to that. That's just exactly how I think.
So
And this decision, obviously, like when like obviously the NFI decision, right? It's not like yep, on it, done.
yeah, that's a one-way door. That's a one-way.
That was a
Yeah.
real one way. Like there is no like never mind NFI. Like we want the brokerage back.
Yeah, can we have a break in case of emergency clause?
Yeah, yeah. So like that, like of course, like thought about it. Like, but
Yeah.
even then, like it's they're I love your analogy of like your brain doesn't know the difference between eating food and making a big decision like this because I
Yeah. Did you choose Cheerios or did you make eggs? Did you sell your company to NFI and keep the tech, or did you keep the brokerage? It's the same decision-making process. And I think probably what goes more into it then would be, okay, if we do this, then what? And you start to do the analysis of what things look like. And then you just say, hey, I'll never know if it was the right decision, but as long as this happens, I'm okay. I'm happy with that outcome regardless.
yeah, and I don't want to sound like too flippant because like a lot of the time the decision like we make like involves like a lot of people. and
Well,
they're right.
that's the
And
weight
so
you
that's like,
carry. Yeah.
yeah, it's you hope you make the right decision. Like they're obviously always like, it might sound fast, but it's always thoughtful, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a big difference. It doesn't have like, it's always thought like, at least I try my best to
Yeah.
like be thoughtful, do the right thing, do what's best for the company, for our investors, for our people, and just try, and
I'm gonna take
then
it a different direction quick. So you said
Mhm.
you got engaged after 3 months and you've been
Yeah.
married for 13 years. You
Uh-huh.
happen to have said 13 years, and I think you started Transfix 13 years ago. So you were
Yeah, yeah,
getting
yeah.
engaged, married and starting a company all at once?
Oh yeah, yeah. That was we thought it was nuts. Like I remember. So we 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 got engaged in 3 months, but we got married 18 months later
Okay,
because we moved. Uh, at the time, we decided like we got engaged and we decided let's move to San Francisco and get married there. So
cool.
that, yeah, we had like we didn't do like the quick like engage married. It was like a long time, and we did like we got married there. Everything went great, and we decided to move back to New York. It's New York for New York. Um, and
I could
I
sing
wanted to start a
Sinatra
company.
would have, we gotta play a little Sinatra song there, the New York one. I'm not gonna sing it, but the marketing team will drop that in.
Yeah, let's do that. New York is the best. So, um, so I'll never forget because I was looking to start a company. I
Mhm.
was honest. I didn't know what it was. I pitched a lot of different ideas to a lot of different people, and they were all terrible. Like, there was like, and one friend in particular asked me to stop pitching. It's like, yeah, just
Can
stop.
you
This is not going anywhere. However, I have a friend who has this idea of a startup but doesn't know where to start it. So why don't you meet him? That ended up being Drew. So Drew came by my place in Brooklyn. We went to a bar next door. I told my wife like I'm gonna meet this guy. We'll see what his idea is. And like it was obviously Drew. It was Transfix, and it was Uber for trucking at the time. Like that's like how I paraphrased it. So like
Yeah.
I came home. She was like asleep. She woke up and she's like, "How'd you go?" I was like, "I'm starting a trucking company." She is, yeah, right, sure.
What every wife dreams of
All right.
hearing.
Yeah. Like I like, and she was like, yeah, sure. Okay. All right. You might still be drunk from last night. Like I don't
Yeah.
believe what you're saying. I'm gonna go to work. I'll see you later. And she came back and she was like, I was already prototyping and working. And she's like, what are you doing? We're starting a trucking company.
Did you have
So
a technical background? Like, do
yeah,
you
yeah.
code? Okay,
That's my full background. I'm an engineer. I'm an engineer by trade. Like worked on a lot of data and engineering projects through my career. Um, so I do not have a logistic background before Transfix at all. So that was also even like more shocking to my wife. Before that, I was uh, the company I worked at the longest company called Guild in the fashion industry. It was a tech
okay.
startup in fashion. So like
So tech startup in fashion, didn't know that that could even be a thing, but that's cool.
that,
Uh,
it was before e-commerce existed.
oh,
We built
really?
one of the first. So we built the first New York, like the flash sale experience of you got to come at noon, and it's like heavy discount product. Like we are the first one to do that.
That's sweet. That's really cool. So
Yeah.
I'm going to take you further back then. So before Transfix, you were doing the fashion startup in tech. You're an engineer by trade. What's your background? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Paris, in France.
Okay,
Uh,
I guessed France, but I wasn't sure. Uh,
I've been here for so long. My wife doesn't speak French. Like I like my accent is like all over the place.
yeah, because you live in New York, and then it blends with the French accent. I couldn't
It's all
pin it.
over. So I moved to Miami. I moved to university from Paris. I graduated high school. Um, like I moved to Miami because I got accepted to University of Miami, and why not? Right, like
Yeah,
sounded great. Out of high school, have the opportunity to go. It was for a computer engineering degree. Why not? Let's go.
yeah.
So I went, I spent 4 years, and I thought I'm going to move back home. But at the time, I had an offer from Microsoft. So it was like, I got to try that. I got to go work for Microsoft. So I moved to Seattle. I worked for Microsoft for 3 hot months. It was not for me.
Crushed it.
I can see why it's for some people.
Yeah.
It's great company, great lifestyle, but I needed like fast speed. Like they were telling me, like, yeah, the project you're working on is launching in 2 years. Like,
You're
I,
like, I could build 3 companies that have already started and failed by then. Come on.
yeah, like what? Why? So moved to New York, and I was like, I'm gonna work for 3 4 months. I'm gonna be done. I'm gonna go home. I worked at this fashion company called Guild, and that's where I met my wife. She also worked there. And then I was like, well, I guess I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna
like,
stay here. Turns out I
wow.
like this lady.
Turns out, yeah, she's from Wisconsin. Like, there's no convincing her to try to live in France. So
Oh, that's funny because I'm from Minnesota, and
yeah.
so Wisconsin. I don't like the Packers, but I do like everything else about Wisconsin. So, right now, my family and I we live in Fargo, North Dakota, but it's right on the border of Minnesota. All the rest of my extended family live in Minnesota. And I was going to ask you, I was like, you've said Seattle, Miami, New York, and San Francisco, and Paris. I'm like, I got to get you to move out to Fargo. But your wife's from Wisconsin, so you're fine. You're good.
You assume I make decision at home. Like, it's nice. Like, I might make some at work, but at home, like, it's just, I don't make. But I think it's
Yeah.
something you gotta convince.
How old are your kids then? Are they grade school?
7 and 3.
7 and 3. So you have a toddler. I mean, you're still crushing this.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well, soon she's like this close to like we're good.
yeah,
It's every dilemma that you have with the small kids are done.
yeah,
And then you like, I keep hearing from people who have like kids that are older, like, don't worry, the problem don't stop. They're just
yeah.
different.
My
They're just
sister is.
different.
I'm the baby of 5, and my second oldest sister has 3 kids that are 17, 15, 13.
Oh
And
wow.
I have 6, 4, 2. And so
Oh,
like
okay, yeah,
it's amazing because they get like her kids help raise my kids because they babysit and they stay overnight. It's
that's great.
amazing. And I complain, I'm like, yeah, 6, 4, and 2. It's just a lot, because it was 5, 4, and 2 for a while. My son just turned 6 last week. And so it's just been a lot, it's a lot of toddlers, it's a lot of activity, and I'm running a couple businesses. It's a lot. But then
Yeah.
she said the same thing. I was just saying, oh, we're almost out of diapers. We're almost done with potty training and, moving on to the next. And she goes, oh, no, not wait till you have 3 teenagers. I was like, okay. So I guess it never ends. I love my life anyways. I'll just get a couple more kids and this is it.
And this is it. Yeah,
Oh, man.
I had an immense pleasure throwing out the diaper garbage
Oh,
recently.
the diaper genie. Oh.
I I smashed it to pieces. It was a wonderful experience. I highly
Uh,
recommend it to all dads out there. Just smash
don't
that.
make me too jealous. I still have a 2-year-old in diapers.
You get
We're
that.
working on the potty training, so it'll be any day now. But
You
then
get
it comes like even with that for like the next year, potty training isn't full on. Like you still got a few
They do
acts.
the night diapers.
Yeah, nighttime diapers and yeah. So
All the
we're
fun.
close. Oh man. So, maybe to drill into one more topic. So we talked about you grew up in Paris, you came to University of Miami, like
Yeah,
oh, super cool.
yeah,
Go Hurricanes, top 5 in the nation right now.
yeah.
What's their quarterback's name? I don't know, but
I
he's
no
Heisman candidate.
idea. I've never like so I from friends, football has always been an interesting sport that was hard to get into, and since COVID, I'm really into NFL.
Yeah.
Uh, love it. I'm realizing I never really understood the sport, and so
Yeah.
when I was in college, I wasn't appreciative of the sport. Um, and now like I have a tough time like following college football, but NFL is just amazing.
I'm a huge NFL fan as well. And
Uh, it's amazing.
well, maybe this will be a good segue then. You said you started watching the NFL during COVID, but I was going to ask you one kind of hard hitting question, which is what was and you maybe have like 10 of them because you're an accomplished entrepreneur. With one, I just want to say you raised venture capital, you started a company as an engineer, and it's been 13 years and you are still crushing it. And that is like
Okay.
very rare because most companies are either a success and the fact that they exited in 5 years and they got out. And there's quite a few founders out there that are done and they did that model and then they maybe start another company. Or there's those who grew over 20 years and eventually built something big. You're kind of in the middle. You raised capital, but you've gone through, I think, Series F now, if I've been following along correctly. And you've spun off the brokerage, you have the tech, and you kind of have like a new, like something that'll probably you wake up in the morning with a new challenge again with this tech company serving brokerages.
Yeah, it's a little bit. It's bittersweet because we like obviously a lot of like great people we had moved on to NFI, and I hope they do great and all that stuff,
Yeah.
and miss working with them. But it's really interesting because it's almost like we did start a new company,
Yeah.
but we kept the team, which is awesome, and we kept all the knowledge that we had built along the years. Right? It's almost in some ways, it's almost like we've had a lab to build all of our product and test them against,
Yeah.
and now like we're graduating to not having the lab anymore. And it's interesting. It's almost like having we're starting another company.
Yeah. I was going to, to pull that thread a little further, I think that, maybe you didn't have the giant exit after 4 or 5 years that you wanted, but I think most founders should be jealous of the fact that you were
Oh,
able to exit and still keep the tech and then kind of like say, hey, now that everything I've learned over a decade, I'm going to pour into this next thing. And you didn't have to start at ground zero and hire strangers again. You've got a
yeah.
team. So it's got to be pretty exciting. And also to be, I guess to make sure that people don't think it's all rosy, a gut wrenching decision to sell the brokerage to NFI, even though it seems to be the best decision and it's a good thing for your companies as a whole. That
Yeah,
couldn't have been like, hey, you just woke up one day like, this is an easy decision. I'm going to do this. But 2020 through
it's bittersweet.
2024 did that to a lot of people. It squeezed everyone in different ways.
Yeah, it was bitter. It was bittersweet. It was pragmatic brain. Like it was the right. It's absolutely the right decision for the business. NFI was the best partner for the job. Like everything
Hmm.
everything made sense. Emotionally, there was some tough time, right? Like it was
Yeah. You don't
like
get to keep everybody. Some people had to be let go. Some
that's
people
right.
got to go to NFI, but maybe didn't want to. And there's just the human aspect of building a business. I always tell my wife this. I say, like, if I could afford it, I would never fire anybody because I like them, generally speaking. I've fired some people I don't like, to be fair, but those are easy decisions because I didn't like them or they weren't nice to us, right? But the people that I've had to fire that, maybe they tried really hard and they just weren't that good at something, or they just wasn't the right fit at Rocket and they could have applied themselves differently, or maybe they're great at finance and we didn't need that.
Yeah,
Uh,
those
those suck. And if I was like, hey, if I had an endless money machine, I wouldn't fire those people. I would just kind of be like, hey, maybe you can do operations with us and everybody. But the true cost is not the salary, it's the culture. And if you're not constantly pruning to make sure that everybody that's on the team, especially in a startup within the first, we'll say 5 years of a company, if you're not all pushing the same speed, there's
you're setting
some,
the
yeah,
standard.
you're setting a bad example. Like you don't have to be this great to be here. Everybody gets to stay. And that's not
Yeah.
how a business that has to make a profit operates.
No, you're the we we've made some mistake. We've learned, and we used to call Transfix like a family, and
Yeah.
it's not true. You don't fire like
Your
I'm
brother
sure
or
some
your
of us would
cousin.
love, like when it's the holidays and my mother drives me crazy. I love to fire her for the weekend.
Yeah.
But it's not how that works, right? Like that's
Yeah.
just like you're it's different. And so when you have a low performer on the team, you're telling the rest of the team like that's the standard you're okay with, and that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
uh,
It doesn't work for the company at the moment. And you're not going to attract the right talent growing in the future because A players, true A players, don't want to hang out with C players. And I hate to put it on a scale like that. We're all
well, yeah,
humans, but it's a competitive market and everybody gets to. Actually, if I pull it back, going back to your thread, what I was going to ask you, what was the hardest decision you've made? And it might be the Transfix one, but you can probably find, or the NFI one, but you can probably find others. But if I pull that, and I say that the hardest decision you make, it might actually just be a mindset. Because people have asked me several times, so I'll go first, and then I'll let you think on yours. Mine was not a singular decision on hiring somebody or firing somebody, or I've had a couple of failed businesses and being willing to actually like take my attention off of those. It was actually a mindset of I thought I was taking care of people like a shepherd, right? Like I love Rocket and I love having employees because I love almost the family aspect of it, right? The culture. That's what drives me. But the hardest decision and the best one I've made so far is changing my mindset away from like it being a family to the best way that I can serve the people at Rocket is to grow the company profitably. And if that's the North Star, some people don't end up coming with. And I had to fire people I didn't want to. And I've hired people that I didn't think were a great fit and they ended up being a good fit. Or maybe I didn't want to spend the money. But if you put your focus on growing the company sustainably, that takes care of the people for the longest instead of just the short term. Because if I failed, everybody loses their job. So what would be that's been my hardest decision as a mindset shift to like, I just don't want to ever fire anybody. Or I only want to hire people and pay them all way above market rate, right? That was another weakness I had. And I just was like, oh, I'll just pay them this much because I can afford it. But sustainably for the company, 2023 was a lot harder than I thought it would be. Turns out it's a lot harder to afford it when you don't have as much profit. So all these things I've learned, mine was a mindset of, okay, it's not about short term taking care of the people, it's long term success.
Yeah, that's very deep. So let me follow that.
I'll rephrase it. Can you think of a
Yeah.
time can you think of a time as you've been building Transfix where you thought it was going to fail and like had
Oh,
sleepless nights of like, oh, we're not going to make payroll, or this is going to fail, or I have to part ways with this employee that I invested
every
in
night
and
is
everybody else thinks is a cancer? Like, have you had to do those things?
every night is either sleepless because of a terrible decision you have to make, or like the or like you're like worried that like you're like I knock on wood, we've never been close to like, oh, we're not gonna make payroll, but except like funny story, the when SVB happened is when I was made CEO, like when SVB had,
Silicon Valley Bank?
yeah, when they had their big meltdown and like
Oh man.
we couldn't get our cash, and that's the time I was like, oh shit, like this is gonna be my first week, and I'm gonna miss payroll because we can't access our
Because the
bank.
bank went under.
Uh, this was quite the week, but outside of that, we were never close. Um, but I think, yeah, that's the life of it. Like if you choose to be a founder, you either have like great moment or terrible one, and the time in betweens are rare.
Yeah, it's almost never just like, hey, things are just pretty good.
Yeah, I think for like I'm trying to think just like for me personally, what's always been hard is I'm really bad at like under like I'm bad. It's gonna sound ironic. I am bad at acknowledging where I'm bad at,
Okay, yeah. It's
and
tough
therefore
for
I
you to
want to
see
try
your
to help.
actual blind spots. Okay.
Yeah, and like therefore I want to try and like not recently, but across the journey of Transfix. One time, like there's a point they were like, all right, like I am good at this stuff, but I am a really bad manager. Like I'm not good at managing people. So I started surrounding myself with incredibly talented manager. I hope our CTO or our CRO, like there's all the C levels we have are like unbelievable managers of talent, or even frankly, all of our managers are really good
Mhm.
managers and better than I'll ever be, because I like it's easy for me to say now because I've admitted it and I'm moving on, but
Yeah.
it took me, I think that's the one, it took me too long, and I was trying to manage too many people, and it's just not something that like I am particularly good at. And so that was a decision that took too long to make and move forward towards, and I think we're a lot better off now, but it took me a
Yeah.
while to admit like, oh, that's right. And we're better for it now, but that was one that took me a while to like
Do you
come
think
to
that
terms with.
Did you find it out from your wife or your coworkers that you weren't good at
So
it?
like I had this moment where like I was like, you know what, like almost like an epiphany moment. Went to my wife. I was like, you know what? I think I need to hire like a CTO, VP engineering that's gonna manage the engineering team. Like I'm just not a good manager. And like I remember she looked at me straight. She's like, "You think you ever were?"
Oh, I
Like,
love it. You
there's
have a
a time
great
you thought you
relationship.
were good at
Very good.
this. Well, I did not realize this was not obvious to you.
Yeah.
So no, she did not tell me, but apparently she knew all along.
Yeah.
And so that was that. But no, I came. What made me realize it is I focused a lot on the action, the task, the decision to be made that I can control, that I can go to and do, and therefore I would do my schedule would be like 99% like project
Yeah, you were
work
a doer.
vision like doing stuff, and then like 1% like maybe less on one-on-ones and um all the stuff that makes good managers. And at some point I was just completely dropping the balls. We lost a couple good people, like it's just I wasn't paying attention, and I was like that was the wake up calls. Like I hopefully I hope so. I don't know what they'll think, but I hope I kept a good relationship with some of the ex Transfix people. And when they left, they were pretty blunt. Like, yeah, you're just like you're a good
Yeah.
guy, but like you suck. So
Yeah.
all right, it is time. It is
Yeah.
time. I can't do this. I am. This is not who I am.
Well, I like that. One, the reason that I'm doing this podcast and interviewing people like Jonathan and like you are, is that there's not many people who are running companies who are willing to talk about anything that they've ever done wrong, right? And then you see like a massive wave of people who have sold their companies and they start podcasts or they go on podcasts and like a whole tour and they talk about all the mistakes they made to like help young entrepreneurs out. And I just think the advice isn't nearly as cogent or as useful from someone who's already done it and has been there, done that, than it is from someone who's doing it at the same time at a different level or in a different vertical. That's why masterminds exist, right? There's a lot of those masterminds where it's like, hey, we're all business owners and we get together and talk about our problems. I think it's kind of unique to do a platform where like Jonathan's willing to admit, hey, I was a bad manager, but you're still running Transfix
I'm
today.
still a bad
And like,
manager.
and it's just
That
amazing that you're willing. And I think that one that probably serves you well in that you're the CEO of Transfix and you've been married for 13 years while growing a company from Series A through Series F. So you're like a very, I would call that much more successful than building a company is to be married for 13 years and to have kids. And that's like way more important than making a dollar and building a company. Doing
hard.
both
I'd argue
statistically,
harder.
yeah, way harder. Statistically, it's impossible that you're still married. That's how bad the odds are for entrepreneurs who are building companies over 10 years.
Yeah.
And so kudos to you on that. And I just appreciate you coming on. You know, as we kind of talk about making mistakes, doing things like that, what would you say if you had any advice to someone who's going to start a company today that is a freight agent or that is a sales rep for a freight brokerage and they say, hey, I've got this idea. What would you give them as advice? Maybe even like a 3-step plan. What would you do first, second, and third if you're going to start a brokerage or a tech company today?
For me, it's just at first is like make sure that's what you really want to do. Like a lot of people, like this is not your 9 to 5.
Yeah.
No, it's never gonna be. It
5 to
never
9,
will
maybe.
be.
Yeah.
Like yeah, maybe exactly. Maybe it's more your 5 to 9 on weekends. Like right, when we're brokers, like the freight needs to be picked up on Christmas, right? Like calls that
Mm-hmm.
happens, like and like sometime it and like in the early there more than in the later, but you just have to know like is it like ask yourself is this for you, because if it's not there's no shame in that. It's not for everybody. um but it's hard to admit it before you even get started, so like
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough to do that litmus test until you really know. So,
yeah. So first and then just like start, like just I like sometimes the hardest part is just you be like yeah okay I'm going and
yeah,
take that first step. Like the advice is just if you know that's what you want to do it.
there you
Um,
go.
and if it fails, find the next thing.
Yeah, and be able to understand why it failed. If you can do that, then you can start another one. I started an e-commerce company and that failed before I started Rocket. And in the meantime, I started a truckload brokerage that also was a total disaster. And then I said, hey, I can't do all things. I guess I'll focus on LTL, final mile, and tech because I can do those things. So I think that that's great advice, Jonathan. I appreciate you coming on and giving me over an hour of your time. And you're running a very large and very new company. So I'm sure you got a lot on your plate. Thank you for coming on, and let's talk
Thanks.
logistics.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.